Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Andy Campbell, and I am Commercial Director at Elevator, and I'm delighted to be your host today for our second of three special programmes, which form our STV series. And this series is a special collaboration between Elevator and STV. So a very warm welcome to all of you who are joining. Hopefully you will find this afternoon's session both informative and inspirational. To recap on who Elevator are, Elevator is one of Scotland's leading business support organisations. We joined forces with STV in 2020 to combine our efforts to support startup and growing businesses across Scotland. Simply put, we share the same commitment in supporting Scotland's SMEs and entrepreneurs. The STV series aims to bring together our networks to create a bustling community of entrepreneurs and provide a platform for individuals to access greater support, advice, information and inspiration to scale and grow their businesses, shape their brands and build their confidence. Before we go on to this afternoon's session, I thought I'd like to give you a few housekeeping notes, if you will. So we want to try and make this session as informative and therefore as interactive as possible. So if you have got questions, please do put your questions into the Q&A or into the chat, and we'll get through them as they come in. But also, because it's a webinar, please do make sure that your microphone is on mute and your cameras are switched off. If you want to ask a question verbally, you can raise your hand and I'll be able to come to that also. But we want to encourage you to answer as many questions as, to ask as many questions as you possibly can throughout this afternoon's session. So moving on to today's session, and it's all about media skills, training and building your brand. I'm going to be joined today by three wonderful panelists who will be able to share their views and their insights into the important issues around media and branding and what you can do as a business to increase your chances of success. I'm going to hand you over now to our very first panel member, and that is Victoria Allison, who is STV Creative Director. Victoria, are you there?
I am, yes, Andy. Hi, hello everyone.
Hi, Victoria. Great to have you with us. So I'm now going to hand over to you. I believe you've got a presentation to run us through, so I'll leave everyone in your capable hands.
Perfect, thank you, Andy. I'm just going to share a screen and get my slides up, so just bear with me one moment. There we are. Could you maybe give me a signal, everyone, that you can see that? Okay. Great, okay. So as Andy said, I'm Victoria Allison. I'm the Creative Director in the commercial team at STV. And I'm delighted to be here today to deliver one of the STV masterclasses for you on building your brand. Just to do a little bit of an overview of what I'm going to get into in the session today, I'm going to cover a bit on why brand matters. I'm going to get into your brand strategy and how you can develop this for yourself and for your own business, and then talk a little bit about brand building beyond that and how that's done across media. And I've got some examples as well of work that we've done at STV Creative that I'll take you through as we go to kind of highlight how we've done this for clients that we work with. Some of the examples are TV based. If you're not at the TV stage of your marketing journey, not to worry, because there are lots of great principles in there that will be able to apply across other modes of marketing as well and building your brand. So first of all, I should really just tell you a little bit more about myself and STV Creative and what we do. So I head up the team, STV Creative, within STV Commercial, and we're STV's in-house creative agency. We're very nimble. There's only 12 of us in total, although we do flex depending on our pipeline and our workload, and we bring in freelancers from time to time, but 12 core staff across production and creative and design as well. And we work with a whole range of clients. What's very interesting is I've been at STV Creative for, I would say, about 8 years now, and our brand has actually developed a lot in terms of who we are and what we do and how we position ourselves over that time. When I started at STV Creative, we were very much about look good for less. That was our mantra, and it was all about helping clients advertise on TV in a really cost-effective way. We're still very much about that and able to do that, but in the past few years, we've evolved into a slightly different proposition, which is about making sure clients get the absolute best effects out of our products by using our unique insights and creative strategy to help them. And as I said, we work with a whole range of clients. It's never a dull moment, and it's everything from local advertisers who might be their first time in TV. It might actually be one of the first times they've actually advertised. And what we're doing with them is really helping them work through their brand proposition and what it is, helping them develop their brand as well. So these jobs are really close to our heart. And then we run the whole gamut. So on the other side of things, we're working with big national and even international brands who want to intersect with our brand at STV, and that's why they're coming to us. And they have a very established brand already, but they want to get that brand rub and halo effect from us because we're so trusted in Scotland. So that's just a little bit of an overview of who we are and what we do, and let me show you some of our work as well.
What do you fancy watching? Oh, how about this? Great.
There we are. So that's just a little bit of what we do at STV Creative and the range of work we've done and brands we've worked with. So let's kick off into the session. And why does brands matter? I should start by saying that you maybe don't know it yet, but we are all experts in brand. We interact with brands every single day and we actually know what they mean, but sometimes thinking about it in terms of your brands is the challenging part. So that's what I'm hoping to help with today. And brand is so important in marketing because it is the way you as a business, you as a individual connect with your customer. It helps you stand out in the marketplace and cuts through. It helps your customer have an affinity with you, your products and your services. And ultimately, brand influences consumer choice. So we interact with brands every single day. I'm sure you can all think about brands you absolutely love and you would gladly trade your hard-earned cash for, even if you can get something comparable in terms of the goods or service you're buying from another brand, even for a little bit cheaper, but you have your go-to brands, and that's because you've got such a strong affinity for them and what they stand for and what they mean for you. So this is why brands is really so important. As consumers, we're absolutely invested in the brands that we purchase and in brand experience. So very importantly, when you're thinking about brand, we need to remember brand is not a logo. Brand identity is so important, and I know we're going to get into that in a bit more detail a little bit later on today. It's a very vital part of establishing and developing your brand with your audience. but brand absolutely goes beyond the look and feel of things. And I heard this great analogy for it. Brand is the way that someone would describe you or your company when you're not in the room. So it's what they would say about you, what someone else would say. So brand encompasses your values as a company, what you stand for, and very importantly, what you mean for the consumer. So probably you may look at this and think I'm contradicting myself, saying that brands aren't about brand marks and identity. But my point here is these are really recognizable international brands marks on this page. So these symbols, they represent the brand's core values, and it's kind of intrinsic for us now. We see the Nike tick as consumers and we know absolutely what that means. We don't need to see the brand name there anymore, but it's because of the way the brand has been built up through its marketing. So just looking at some of these and what they stand for, if you boil down the core values, Chanel, it's all about luxury. Nike, it's about performance, about drive, and also about aspiration. Kellogg's, about family, quality, and dependability as well. So this just showcases a little bit how brand marks can actually incorporate and take on the power of the values that underpin them. I spoke a little bit earlier about STV and the fact that we are such a trusted brand, and I just wanted to show you this example of channel sponsorship. This is a brand we've worked with at STV a number of years now, called Galloway. It's cheese, cheddar to be precise, and they do channel sponsorship a lot. And the reason they use this product is because through channel sponsorship, it's quite unique and different to an ad campaign, because they are aligning with STV and with our brand, and they're getting a halo effect from the power of our brand and the trust that we have with our audience. So just let me show you this, and I can perhaps chat a little bit more afterwards.
If you can only cook one thing, make it magic. I'm Mr. Cheese and Toast. The secret? I'm taking it with me. It makes me think of lazy Sundays with the family, just watching the telly and hiding from the cold. Perfect.
Bringing it home. STV, sponsored by Galloway.
There we are. So again, just thinking about the brand values behind this and what's underpinning it. Obviously, the product is cheese, very matter of fact, but Galloway are very much about family times, family moments, and putting themselves at the centre of that kind of family meal time. So we created this kind of story, this narrative around the channel sponsorship. And there's a series of these, and they're all about how, like, almost like memories of people reminiscing about enjoying the product, whether they're cooking it, whether they're, you know, remembering meal times at their granny's when she made them her super famous top secret mac and cheese, which they could never get the secret recipe from her on. And through this, we're really creating this emotive link between the brand and the values and what they stand for on screen with our audience. And it's very powerful. It really resonates. So let's just think about how you can develop your own brand strategy. And it's, I'm sure, we just spoke about cheese. I was going to say, I'm sure it sounds cheesy, but it very much starts with you. And it is very much before you get into your kind of marketing journey, you need a solid brand to underpin that. You need a solid brand to market. And for you, that means identifying what your USP is, what makes you unique and stands out in that marketplace, what your values are, what you stand for as a brand, and what you mean for the consumer. It's very interesting, that USP and what makes you unique and different. Just be yourself. It's so important. And you'll find that brands who are very successful, there's a real authenticity of the experience that's underpinning them as well. And I would really, really recommend that you kind of dig deep and go back to that kind of root. You know, what are you all about? What's the authentic part of your brand and your message and your story? And what makes you different? We work with a lot of first-time advertisers who, for example, are so proud to be family-run businesses. And what we have to speak to them about when they come to us is, that's brilliant and that's so important for you, but it actually doesn't differentiate you enough from your market, because in your sector, you know, we've got 10 other advertisers on STV who are all saying that. So it's very much about, you know, working out what your unique proposition is and working that through the core of your strategy. So as I said, what you stand for is like the key crux of what you need to think about and drill down into. And then on the flip side of that, once you've worked that out, what's in it for your audience? What is your proposition? Why should they care? Now, these questions, you might want to take a screen grab of this if you are working through your own brand strategy at the moment, because you may find it useful, or I can share the presentation with the team afterwards for anyone who's interested in it. But these questions, again, dead simple, but these are questions that when we're working with clients through their brand strategy and helping them develop that and develop their proposition, we run through these with them. So first of all is asking yourself, what do you do and how do you do it? Who are you here for? That's all about your core audience. Who are you trying to target? What do you value the most? So what's the important thing to you, and how do you reflect that through your brand? What's your personality? So we often ask clients, if they struggle with this one, to think of themselves as a car, and what kind of car would you be? And again, it might sound a bit silly, but that really helps you gauge not only what your kind of values are, but also what your personality is and how you might start to shape that and weave that through your brands. What makes us different? And I spoke about that a little bit just there, about your key proposition and USP, and what will make you stand out from the market. And what is our reason for being, which is very existential sounding, but ultimately that's your why. Why do you exist? What's your purpose? So those are things to think about when you're developing your brand. And now let's move on to some brand building tips once your brand is established. So the first tip I give advertisers and brands who are starting their marketing journey is to be unexpected. Now you might look at this, if you recognize this image, it's from the famous Guinness campaign with the horses and surfers, where they obviously did something very unexpected for their brands. And I believe it was a hard sell to the client in the beginning, but they really bought in, and it was a very successful campaign. And you might look at that and you think, well, that's great if you're a massive brand with a huge marketing budget, spending millions. What does that mean for me in terms of my marketing? But I've got an example of a brand we've worked with at STV that will hopefully represent that on scale. So let me play this ad for you.
Due to COVID-19, it's now more important than ever to keep on top of your medication. And the MedSmart app is here to help. Set reminders, scan all your medicines, and keep your treatment plan on track. Whether it's for asthma, birth control, pain relief, or for your mental health, never forget your medicine again. Plus, track your loved one's treatments by creating unique profiles for the whole family. Stay home, stay safe, and stay on top of your medicine with the MedSmart app.
There we go. So this is an ad we made for MedSmart, and as you can see from the ad, it's an app to help people keep on top of their medication. So on the face of it, if you look at it, the animated style, the color palette, is not what you would expect from a medical app. And when we were having conversations with the client, you know, we very much encouraged them to be able to stand out in their market. And you know, we often encourage people to, like, what we would say, zig when the market's zagging, but it is so important to do something that is different and unexpected to stand out in what can be a cluttered marketplace. And the client really bought into this. They really liked the idea of dispelling those kind of like myths and stereotypes that you know, like medical products are like, you know, boring or fuddy-duddy, or, you know, like super serious, and doing something that was a bit fun and playful that would resonate with the audience, but also, you know, make it quite simple and make it feel accessible as well. So that's just an example of a client we've worked with who have done something a bit unexpected and different across their marketing. Now, I've encouraged to surprise and do something different, but my next recommendation is also to make sure that you are consistent as well. And this is an example of a client we've worked with, McDonald Flooring, where they've done just that. And I'll perhaps show you their campaign and then talk a little bit more about why this is so important in terms of consistency. So this is the spot ad that we created for McDonald Flooring.
McDonald Flooring, family-run flooring specialists fitting your style. Sounds good.
So this is a great example, again, of a client doing something that's been unexpected. McDonald Flooring wanted to showcase their product range, and they could have quite easily done that with a showroom shoot, you know, just like showing all the product as you can buy it there. But as I said, they were keen to do something different with us as well. And we came up with this concept where we shot it against green screen, which allowed us to drop in a lot of different products. It actually future-proofed the ad as well, because it means the client can swap in different products at a later date if they want to and keep it refreshed. And we created this drumbeat and this tagline, "Sounds good." So that was something a little bit different. But as we were creating the campaign for the client, it became apparent that they didn't have a strong brand identity. And while I say be unexpected where you can, I also said that it's very important to be consistent. And again, brand is where that consistency is really, really key. So across the marketing touchpoint of TV, they were able to do something a little bit different, but through developing their brand identity and making sure across the television campaign that worked seamlessly with all their different touch points, including the liveried vans, which I showed you earlier, their point of sale. That just makes sure that your brand is reinforced through every interaction you have with a consumer, and that is so important. So do be mindful of your marketing. It's not just happening in one single point. You have that halo effect with your brands across all your marketing touch points, and to really resonate and connect with your audience and to build your brand properly, you need to make sure that everything kind of marries up really nicely. So your logo needs to be needs to be really on point, and it needs to be the same logo across all your different touch points. Your website is so important. People sometimes forget about the user journey when they get to the website, and I always say we can create a really great attention grabbing ads that will drive people to your website, but they won't buy anything if it's a kind of messy user journey at their end. So just be mindful of that as well. The next tip I would give in terms of building your brand is nailing your message. And this is so important as well. Again, another tip or question we always ask clients is, can you say it on a t-shirt? We actually, in our briefs, give them a t-shirt that we ask them to write their proposition on. If you can't do that, it's probably too long. And there's such a desire from new advertisers, people starting their advertising and marketing journeys, to say so much across their marketing and deliverables and their campaigns, because of course you've got so much to say about yourself. But research shows that when you throw too many messages at your audience, they're not going to take any in. Again, a great kind of metaphor we use for it is throwing tennis balls at people. If you throw loads of tennis balls at a person, they won't catch one. If you throw one tennis ball, they'll catch it. And the same principle applies with your marketing message. Do be really clear and precise on what you want to say, and don't clutter your marketing with multiple messages, because unfortunately they just won't resonate. So do spend a bit of time when you get to the marketing side working on your proposition, what you want to say and how you can clearly deliver that to your audience. This is another example of a client we worked with, Stokes. So again, you can see the proposition we boiled down for them. The message was 100% Scottish, but with Scottish spelt with O in there. I'll show you this as well. This is an ad we created for their social media. There we are. So yeah, as I say, a really clear, simple message, but that was all about the fact that the product's made in Scotland. They put loads of great, fresh, Scottish sourced ingredients in there, and they're really proud to be a Scottish brand. So that's how we kind of boiled it down to that proposition. And just again, talking about just consistency across touch points. We created a channel sponsorship campaign for the client, but off the back of that, we also created these little social media ads as well, just so that the messaging would be consistent. And they rolled that out across their website. We supplied them with the artwork as well, just so everything was really nicely joined up, and just really strengthened their proposition for the audience that we're targeting. Now, the last tip I'm going to leave you with is that emotion cuts through, and it is a really brilliant way for brands to build their brand and resonate with an audience. Again, I've got an example here. Oh no, sorry. Before I get to that, just to give you a little bit of, I guess, proof in the pudding. So for those of you who like stats, the IPA has shown that emotive campaigns are 50% more likely to drive sales and profit. And that is why emotion is so important in marketing and connecting with your audience in that way, because it actually does convert them, and research shows it gets results. So let me show you an example of another client we've done that for. And again, I can just round off by telling you a little bit about this and our approach.
Every home is filled with memories and the people we love, and Eco Fire and Smoke Alarms are here to protect them. In Scotland, fire safety legislation is changing. We want to make sure every home is ready with first-class alarm systems by the deadline on February the 1st. Eco, fire and carbon monoxide detection specialists. Protect your family. Find an approved installer at eco.co.uk.
There we go. So Eco Fire and Smoke Alarms, not a product you would necessarily think of taking an emotive route through their marketing. But in the discussion with the client, their brand is very, as you can probably see from their brand identity, it's very kind of trusted, reliable, safe. It's all about security. And they wanted to advertise on STV because, as mentioned in the ad, the legislation was changing in terms of fire and carbon monoxide alarms. So it was a great time for them to be on television. They could have taken a different approach. They could have been, very lectury. They could have gone down the, fear factor. Here's what might happen if you don't have one. But we steered the client away from that, and we took them down this route, which was all about, again, an emotive route, but all about, focusing on the things that you love. The important things in your home, the important people, and how connecting their product with that, with the audience, how their product can actually help you protect what you love. And that was a really nice and very effective approach for them. And I know you may be thinking perhaps your brand or, your product or service, whatever you do, because I know some of you here today are creators, so you actually are your own brand. You're probably thinking, how do I connect with the audience in an emotive way in that? But there are lots of different ways to do that. Emotion doesn't just need to be, happy, sad, romantic. There are lots of real emotive ways to approach your audience, and connecting with them, showing who you are behind your brand is a really great way to do it if you're a creator. What are you, who are you all about? Just having a little bit of, behind the scenes and your personality is really important. Tapping into things like, Scottish pride, things like that. These are all emotive roots as well. So it doesn't need to be, as I say, that kind of tugging at the heartstrings approach. There are other ways to do that. Humor is another great way as well. So that is me. I will just leave you with a quick roundup of the key points that I hope to leave you with. So firstly, I hope I've established that brand matters. And to have your brand matter, first you need to work out your strategy. And then in terms of continuing to build on your brand, keep at it, but be clear, consistent, and emotive. And in terms of developing a brand that will help you stand out in the marketplace, just do you. Be authentic, be real and find your USP and your sweet spot, because the audience will really buy into that. So thank you very much. I look forward to answering some questions from you a little bit later on, but I'll stop sharing for now, and I'll speak to you all soon. Thank you.
Great, Vic. Thank you so much indeed. That was a wonderful presentation with some fantastic tips in there and approach. I'm sure that will certainly get the thinking going with our audience. Just a reminder to everyone, if you do have any questions at all about branding, please feel free to add them to the chat or to pop them into the Q&A section as well. And of course, if you do want to ask a question that you would rather do verbally, please just pop your hand up and hopefully I'll spot that if we're able to do that, and I'll be able to have you come on screen to ask your question directly to our panelists today. So we've heard from Vic. That was really great to go over with you. And now I'd like to introduce you to one of my colleagues at Elevator, Lynne Martin, who heads up our Creative Accelerator program. And Lynne is also joined by Laura. And not only is Laura a graphic designer herself, but also Laura is going through our Creative Accelerator with Lynne. So I'll hand you now over to Lynne to give you a little bit of an introduction and overview on what she does and her approach to brand with the businesses we work with. Over to you, Lynne.
Thanks, Andy. And oh, Vic, that was amazing. In fact, the quote, brand is what people say about you when you leave the room. That was one of the first things I was going to open with. So it's awesome to know that we're on the same page with that. And yeah, it was Jeff Bezos at Amazon, who I think knows a thing or two about branding, who said that one. So I'm going to introduce you to some of the tools that we use at Elevator that really help our founders figure out what their branding is all about. But first of all, just to introduce you to my job, which, by the way, I could not be luckier. I have one of the best jobs, I think, in the creative sector in Scotland, because I get to work with, hundreds of amazing businesses across the course of a year, and being able to focus on the creative sector is a bit of an honour. And I think when it comes to branding, particularly for creatives, it can be a little bit of a challenge, because what you're doing is, and like Victoria said, it's all about emotionally engaging people with what it is that you do. And when you're an artist and a maker, that's the thing that's at the very forefront of your practice. It's the thing that you want to do. You want to elicit an emotional response from people who want to buy your products or use your services or go see your performances. But one of the hardest things to do is to look commercially at the opportunities that are afforded to you by the qualities and the values that you really want to put out there. So I'm just going to share with you some of the approaches that we use at Elevator. One of the main tools that we use on our accelerator programs is called the business model canvas. Now for Laura, this is going to be a little bit scarily familiar. And for those of you who I see in the attendees list there, some of you have been on our programs before, so you'll be very familiar with this. So for some of you, it's treading old ground, but I just want to share with you this particular tool for those of you that aren't familiar. Here we go. Oh no, that is not the right one. So that is part of our actually showed you a different business model canvas there. That's our environmental canvas, where we're working with businesses to look at their environmental impact, which is an entirely different kettle of fish, but not necessarily unrelated. But here's the business model canvas, and I'm just gonna, there we go. So you can see all that there. Can I just get a little wave from someone on the panel if you're excellent? So this is the business model canvas, and what this does is it allows you to see exactly what is happening in your business at any given time. And you can see the center element here, and don't worry, I'm not going to give you a full-on business model canvas lesson today. But what you can see there in the middle is this thing called your value proposition. And that's the thing that Vic was talking about when she's talking about that emotional resonance with your audience. Your value proposition is not what your product or service does for your customer or for your end user. It's what it means for your end user. And this particular element on the business model canvas is the basis for your branding. So you're thinking about who your customers are, what it is that you do, and what your product or service really means for them, and how you can communicate that. So I'm just gonna, we can share this with you after, after the session today. But just so you're aware, when I talk about value proposition, I'm talking about something that sits at the center of your business, which is a thing that it really means to your customer. How do you resonate with them? So one of the things that people get a little bit stuck with on program is, how do I communicate what my unique selling point is? How do I talk about the thing that I do? And how do I get out of my own head when it comes to communicating what? And Laura's nodding. I don't think you can see her if you're not on panel, but yeah. How do you communicate? How do you really get out what your product or service represents to people? And I'm actually just going to ask Laura how the program has helped you kind of figure that out. So feel free to unmute and yeah, how has the program helped you with that, Laura?
Oh, I mean, it's the program in general just holds up this massive mirror, and it's exactly what you need, especially when you're on your own. If you start out, if you do plan to grow a business at the start, chances are it's just you by yourself, and it's that getting out of your own head that's really, really tricky, and that's part of the reason why I got on the course in the first place, was to get someone to help me figure that out. And it's just Elevator just provides this space where you can sort of, they ask you the right questions, they challenge you in the right places, and it slowly these answers start to tease out. And the great thing is, as well, is they don't give you the answers. And I think that's really important, is that, you know, you can't go in this program and expect someone to just tell you what your value prop is or anything. They just give you the tools to be able to pull it out yourself, and being able to do it yourself is so much more powerful than somebody else giving it to you, because it means you had it all along. You just needed the help to get it out there. And if you're feeling bad, like, how do I not know how to do this? I don't think any business owner does it first. So that's why things like Elevator are so useful and so valuable.
That's brilliant to hear. Thank you, Laura. And just something that I wanted to cover with regards to business activity and value proposition. So like Vic said, your value proposition isn't your logo, and it's not exactly what it is that you do. And I've got a really good example of this. In our Creative Accelerator through in Perth, we work with lots of individual artists and makers, because that's the makeup of the creative community there. And I've worked with 5 jewelers now. And I'm going to pose a question to those of you in the audience, and you don't have to say anything. You don't have to put your hands up or put anything in the chat, but I just want you to think, do you think your business is unique? I'm going to bet you said yes in your head just then. Do you think you have a proposition that nobody else has in your own certain way? I'm going to bet the answer is yes. Do you think that you add value to your customer? The answer is yes. Do you think you are of good value to your customer monetarily? The answer is yes. And I'm not psychic here. I just know how people think about their businesses. So the thing about the value proposition is that you have to dig down into a deeper level. And on the course that we run in Perth, I've worked with, like, say, 5 jewelers now. And on the basic level, their business models are pretty much the same. They have their small priced earrings are probably about £30. Their medium price stuff is about 100. Their upper range is maybe £300 to £400. They are really talented in their fields. They're brilliant makers. They've all got excellent skills in what they do. They have little workshops based in cool, quirky places in Scotland, so rural Perthshire or central Dundee or that sort of thing. They offer bespoke solutions to their clients around making jewellery, melting old jewellery down, and doing all that stuff. Their activities are the same. Their financial bottom line is the same. They're mostly working in silver. They're mostly working in other precious metals, all of them use stone setting, that sort of stuff. So on paper, on a spreadsheet, they're the same business. But that's not what makes them the business that they are. And the thing that makes them the businesses that they are the creative outlook that the founders have, the aesthetic that the founders have, and the experience that they bring to the jewellery bench in terms of what their inspirations are. And I've got an example of 2 really similar businesses, but they look completely different in terms of branding. And this is really, I think, articulates exactly what I say when it's not about what your business does, it's about what it represents to the customer. So I'm going to share my screen, get the right one this time. Here we go. So there we are. two very different jewellery styles. So on the left here, we have a recent rebrand. Karen Smith Jewellery has just branded into Metallium. And on the right-hand side, we have Align Jewellery by Kate McLaughlin. So Karen is a jeweller of over 25 years experience. Her work is really intricate. She bases all of her work on universal storytelling symbols. So there's a lot of hearts in her work. There's bird cages, there's clocks, there's cogs, there's all sorts of really interesting imagery in there. And her story is all about helping people wear their secrets in plain sight. So it's all about the emotion and the stories that you attach to the jewelry that you then wear, that you're wearing something about yourself that is secret but on the outside. So it's this really interesting way of looking at what jewelry represents, and that's Karen's there. Kate has come at jewellery making from an architectural background, and that's really obvious when you see what it is that she makes. It's all very angular. Her name is Align. It's all about the space between pieces of jewellery. It's all about the aesthetic of really clean, austere lines. They're all chunks of silver. They all cost roughly the same to make in terms of materials and time, but it's the artist's outlook that's the thing. And when you look at the branding for Karen, here for Metallium, it's that universal storytelling symbol of that heart, but it's got an edge to it. It's not saccharine, it's not sweet, it's a little bit edgy, a little bit jaggy, and that's the type of people that she wants to attract. People who are a little bit quirky, who feel that they're interesting, who want to show their individuality. Kate, on the other hand, her jewellery is really simple, clean lines, and she said austere to the point of almost not being there. Her jewellery is for people that want to decorate themselves, but it's a no-nonsense decoration. It's someone who wants to put in a pair of earrings to transition from day to night, to look smart, to look professional. And these are just it's a really interesting way of looking at the same product, essentially, bottom line, but the branding is so different because the artists know what they represent. And not only that, the artists know what their work represents to the customer. And that's the thing that Victoria was talking about with regards to knowing who you are, but know who your audience is and what they're going to get from you. And I think that these two examples are really nice visuals for that. But I think, Laura, you might have quite an interesting take on this because you have been working with us to establish what your USP and your value proposition is, but you're a graphic designer and you work with people on their logos. So what does your process for helping people look like?
I mean, it's very, very much about digging deep and getting into the crux of, what it is that makes these business owners tick. Like, I think it's something that's really, really important is getting to know them as people, because, that's one of the sort of main drivers of a small business owner is you have this kind of need to do this thing, you have this urge to create. So that's where I kind of start, just getting to know them as people. And then a lot of the time, a lot of people don't know an awful lot about their own customers and their own audience and things like that. You do have this we all have this kind of fear of niching down because it feels like you're cutting yourself off a massive market, but the importance of defining who those people are, and I'm learning this myself being on the forefront of it, that's the sort of next step. So getting to know the business owner and the business, why they started up, and then getting to know their customer. And I just think that those two examples that you gave there are just such brilliant examples of it's essentially the same business, as you say, but the importance of defining the difference between the two audiences and the difference between the two makers, and how powerful that is once you really drill down into what makes these people different and what makes them unique. And it's not an easy process. Like, I'm still going through it myself, because my job is to decorate other people's businesses essentially and help them visually represent themselves in the world. So when it comes to sort of branding myself, that's a really difficult thing to project, because my job is to project your image. So yeah, it's not an easy process, but it's one that is absolutely worth digging into. Commit to the time to discovering why you're doing your business, who you are as a business owner, and who your audience is, because that time spent is going to save you so much money and time in the long run.
Absolutely, that's really sound advice. And I think one thing I would just like to ask you is, I know that, remember that earlier on in the program we had a conversation that you said, we should call a mirror conversation, because having that sounding board and someone just being able to say, this is what you're saying, Is this right? And how do you feel about that, about your brand and your business? I know that that was a really valuable conversation for you. And would you have any advice for people who maybe haven't been on an accelerator program, who might want to find that conversation? Where might they have that? Who might they have that sort of thing with?
I mean, yeah, I think you could probably have that conversation with almost anybody in your life, whether it's your spouse or partner, a family member, or a friend. I mean, it helps. Obviously, I had that conversation with you, and you're in the creative space, so you kind of understand. You understand where I'm coming from and stuff. But I think that conversation could be just as valuable with somebody who's not in a creative sphere, because they give you a completely kind of unbiased reflection of your business, and they'll pick up on things that you maybe didn't see. And again, this going back to this mirror perspective, this mirror name for it, which is I've just realized that a trick for when artists are drawing is to hold up a mirror so that they can see if there's anything wrong. You see your painting or drawing from a different perspective. So that's kind of what this whole process is about. That whole kind of getting a reflection from someone is about. Maybe I've said that you could get it from a spouse or a family member. It maybe is better to get it from maybe a colleague or someone a little bit more removed, just because, again, they don't have that kind of existing knowledge and that kind of, not bias, but that kind of, they might already be slightly knowledgeable about what you do. So if you've got a trusted colleague or a friend who's maybe doesn't know a lot about what you do, that could be a great place to get that reflection from.
Cool, thank you. So I think we've just basically highlighted today how important it is to just get lots of different perspectives on these conversations, to draw out exactly what it is that you and your business represents. And the more people challenge you on it, the more succinct you're going to be when it comes to seeking help for branding from someone like Laura or from STV Creative. So yeah, I'm going to end on that and hand back over to Andy. Thank you, Laura, for chatting with me.
No worries, thanks for having me.
Great. Lynne, thank you so much. Laura, thank you so much for both of your inputs. I guess ultimately this is the bit of the programme that we open it up for Q&A. A number of wonderful insights into not only the theory behind brand creation, but some of the very practical applications that you have to go through when you're either creating your brand or in Laura's case, creating brands for other people, and graphic design part of that, of course, but it's more than just that. We've got some questions in, which is great. So just encourage all of our attendees, if you do have any questions, please do file them into the Q&A section or pop them up in chat. However, one of the first questions that came in was for yourself, Vic. So come to you with this question, and it's, what is your all-time favourite advert that you have been involved in creating, and why?
I think, and it was an STV campaign, but it wasn't actually an advert as such. But I think the best one that I worked on was for Seconda, and what they did, rather than doing advertising, we created little 1-minute programs for them. So it was content, but it was branded content. And we went on a road trip across Scotland, and we did some like street style filming. So we found people in lots of like key cities and just like found out a little bit about them, who they were, what they did, like filmed their great style, and had a bit of product placement in there. And the reason I loved that was because it was so much fun to do, but it was also such a clever route into connecting with the audience for that brand, rather than just being really salesy. They, it was all about like engaging with people and showing how the product could be like worked into people's kind of like day-to-day wardrobe. So yeah, so that was a favorite for me.
Yeah, great. And maybe actually just broaden that question out slightly for both Lynne and Laura, because obviously one of the things that all of the panelists have said today, that a brand is more than just a logo. And I think that's one of the, Lynne, the traps that we see some of our companies that come through our programs, just thinking brand is all about coming up with a name or come up with a logo, and that's kind of it. But brands mean so much more, that it's the values that they impart to their customers. So Lynne and Laura, what are some of your favourite Scottish brands that you would like to highlight?
There's pure tons, and it feels like a little bit of a cop-out because Vic mentioned it.
You've got to pick one, Lynne. Got to pick one.
I've got a big slab of Galloway cheddar in my fridge. And I swear it's like the best sort of like go-to everyday cheese. And I know it sounds like I don't have any imagination and can't quite come up with anything, but genuinely when I saw that I was so happy. So I tend to engage with brands based on if I've worked with them. So a lot of the artwork that I have in my home, a lot of the jewelry that I wear, a lot of my kind of the furnishings that I have are by people who I've worked with. There's a whole load of them behind me, like my lamps by a brand that I worked with on the last Creative Accelerator in Perth. So I resonate with brands on whether or not I know the people. I've become hyper local in what I enjoy engaging with, and I think that's probably the way quite a lot of people are going to go. So it's an exciting time for small and medium businesses because people are now more receptive to those smaller businesses and what they represent. So I think it's a total cop out, but cheese and the artists that I work with are the brands that I tend to engage with.
No problem at all then. And Laura, you've obviously worked with a number of companies, whether they're national Scottish brands or maybe some hyper local ones that you work with. But, if you were to pick a favourite and maybe a reason why, Laura, what would you suggest?
I mean, oh gosh, do you know, it's one of those ways that when you're asked a question on the spot and you're like, I can't think of anything now. So in terms of like my favourite kind of advertising Scottish brands, like the first thing that popped to mind was Iron Brew. And I think the part of the reason that popped to mind is I like Iron Brew, but also because they have like a really great sense of humour with their ads. And apart from that being, I think, a very Scottish trait is being able to take the mick out of yourself. I think that really lands, and that kind of touches on what Vic said about emotions and being emotive. And you don't have to be sappy or scary to be emotive. You can be funny. In terms of Scottish brands that I've worked with, gosh, I can't think of any now. There's one that I've worked with recently is a new community interest company called Greater Govanhill, and they create a magazine celebrating the culture and the diversity of Govanhill, the area in Glasgow. And I have just had the greatest time working with Rhiannon, who set up that company. I designed the sort of brand identity and visual identity of the magazine from scratch, and it's just been the greatest collaboration that I've worked on. So, and that's like Lynne, that's hyper local, and I just. That again, that's kind of what I'm working on with my value prop. It's all about being emotive and just working with real people that are just dead passionate about what they do.
Yeah, no, fantastic. And Vic, you mentioned there about the simplicity almost in a brand and keeping that message really quite simple, Vic, and that being something that companies perhaps struggle with because they want to try and say too much. What are some of the brands or maybe some of the practices that you can put in place that just helps to really distill down what your core value is, what your core message to your customer might be?
Yeah, I mean, writing it down is really key. And that's why, as I said, when we've got our brief templates that we work through with clients when we're doing advertising for them, we actually have a picture of a t-shirt. And we, like we say, if it won't fit in the t-shirt, it's too long or it's too much to say, and it really just needs to be one key thing. So again, when we were working with clients to get to that t-shirt stage, we would get them to kind of write down everything that they want to say. What do you think your key messages are? They might write 5, and then we start stripping that back. So which is really the one that is differentiating or unique for you? Think about who your competitors are, think about your audience, think about your target market, and then you start knocking them off. Does this make you stand out from your competitors? No, that's not your message then. Does this resonate with your audience? No, not your message. Are you not sure? Like Lynne mentioned, go and find someone to bounce it off with, your neighbor, your mum, your postman. These are all the people to bounce your message off of and see if it resonates with them, because outside your sphere and your direct bubble, they're actually your target market, and you kind of need to get a little bit out of that echo chamber as well. So different points of view are really key to that.
Yeah, and getting that great sound advice from externals is really quite important. And Lynne, at Elevator, we talk an awful lot about having a customer-centric business, making sure that your customer is really the end point of all your considerations. in terms of brand development, how closely could you work with your customer to help you articulate what your values are, or help you articulate what your particular messaging might be?
So there's an incredible book, and I can't remember the name of the author, but it's called Talking to Humans. And it's about, rather than going out to market research with a product that you know that you have and saying, what do you think of this thing? It's about asking people about the problems that they have and taking that and using it to inform your product and service, but also inform the language that you use to talk about it. Because within those conversations that you have with potential customers, you're finding out how they want to communicate with you. And then you can reflect it back to them when it comes to selling your product or service, or to collaborating with them and working with them and to serving them. And they're much more likely to be receptive because that's language that they've used before. So it's about, your market research is a brilliant brand building tool, because you're just going out and asking people, like, what do you need? And then you can then go back and inform your activity or inform your product with those insights. And ultimately it builds your brand, but it's also the best way to build the best product or service for the people that you want to serve with your business.
Yeah, and I guess it's something that's always evolving as well. You know, I guess if you were to look at the evolution of any particular brand, you would see that change over a period of time as they weave in more of a particular message or more of a particular approach to a specific audience that they're looking to go for. And of course, some companies go through a rebranding exercise, and that can be more than just a, you know, let's change the logo, let's change the font that we use. Laura, rebranding, is that an area that you've had much experience of, and what are some of the danger areas when it comes to rebranding as a business?
Yeah, I work with a lot of companies when they want to just either they're pivoting to a slightly different market, or they just feel like they're in need of a refresh. I think, you know, in my experience when I've worked with rebrands, it's always been for one of those two reasons. But I think the pitfalls of rebranding is, maybe you're feeling a bit stuck and you don't really know what else to do. So you just think, oh, I'll just get a new logo, that'll help, kind of thing. So you've got to, if you're considering rebranding, really consider why. Is it because you're not able to connect with your customers? Do you not feel like your brand truly represents you? And if not, why not? You know, reach out to a designer like myself, or, you know, even STV Creative, and just, you know, even try and get a consultation. Again, get a bit of that reflection, but also from a professional point of view. So really, just if you're going to consider a rebrand, like really ask yourself why you're doing this and whether you actually need to, or if there's actually another problem at play there.
Yeah, and you mentioned STV Creative, and Vic, I guess that's a service that you offer to all of the clients that are looking to get support through STV Creative, because you are almost a sounding board in your own right. You're able to work with your customers and really ask them the difficult questions to make sure that they understand what it is that they're trying to communicate out to the audience. So rather than just taking copy or you know, finalized adverts, you really do work with them to make sure that message is finely tuned.
Yeah, that's right. And a lot of the clients we work with through our STV Growth Fund in particular are kind of brand new to TV, and you know, a lot of them are brand new to advertising at all, and they do need a good bit of support working through what they should be saying. And you know, just the thing is, they often know like what their brand is and what it's about, but it's about drilling into that and articulating it in the right way for the audience. And that's what we work really closely with our clients and help them do.
Great. And of course, you know, there are lots of brands out there that are what I would consider disruptor brands. I guess, you know, the supermarket space is one area where, you know, if you go to any of the major well-known brands within there are lots of sub-brands that you're very familiar with purchasing, but then you've got disruptor brands like Aldi and Lidl that carry a whole different stock and range. But of course, you're buying from that brand itself, which has a whole different reason to it altogether. And social media right now in this day and age plays a really important part. But is there space, Lynne, do you reckon, for disruptor brands to come through and upset the apple cart, so to speak?
Always, because that's how things progress, right? Like that's how behaviors change, and that's how we start looking at, yeah, I mean, it's an interesting way to look at it, but disruptor brands change our behavior. Aldi and Lidl have started, they've changed how we look at our weekly shop, which is a really interesting thing to do. And ultimately, if that's what disruptor brands do, we need them to keep constantly shaking us up and doing new things. So the answer will always be yes, for sure.
Yes, fantastic. And that's a really positive note to finish on then, Lynn. I'd just like to extend a very warm thanks to Laura, to Lynn and Vic for joining us this afternoon. It's been inspirational and informational, and hopefully for our attendees, you've been able to get something from today's session. So thank you to all of them for joining us today. We'll be back on with our third series in the STV series, and that is taking place next month on June the 9th. And that particular subject is connecting with your customers. The most important thing that every business should have is a focus on their customers. So connecting with your customers is next month, June the 9th. Until then, and we look forward to you joining us then, but until then, have a great week and be brave. Thank you.